good afternoon, and a big warm welcome to everybody listening to this YouTube tape and recording. And a big welcome to Lucy, who has very kindly come along to talk about anxiety today. It's a really big issue with many of our clients. It's something that I've suffered from in the past, and I've learned all sorts of things through therapy that have helped me with that. I'm Floss Knight. I'm the co-founder of UK Therapy Guys. And as I said, I'm delighted to introduce Lucy, who's going to give us a few tips. We're going to have a bit of a discussion, and she's going to tell us a bit more about anxiety, where it comes from, and so on. But I'll let Lucy lead on that. Hi.
Hi, thanks, Floss. It's lovely to be here. Thank you for having me. So I'm Lucy, and I'm a counsellor. I've been a therapist for just over 3 years now, and I think my own kind of journey has been really based around my own experiences with anxiety and my own struggles around kind of dealing with my own anxiety and worries. And so maybe a good place to start is to really perhaps look at what actually is anxiety and what does it feel like for someone. And so, for me, like based on my experience, when I feel anxious, it's because it's when I feel under threat, or I feel tense or afraid that something might happen, or quite often it's based on previous experience, so that something has happened in the past, and something might be about to happen again, that is a trigger for me, so it makes me anxious, and which it's really, and I know it's a natural response to kind of when we're being put out of our comfort zone. So perhaps a good example is today. Doing this interview is not necessarily my comfort zone, and so I felt some anxiety, but I recognised that actually what I was feeling was anxiety, but also excitement as well, because they're quite similar feelings. And so I think it's really important to remember that anxiety is a natural feeling that we feel when we're under threat. The difficulty, or the struggle can be, is when it happens constantly and continually, and we're not able to function normally without feeling anxiety, and that's when it can become an issue.
Right, that's brilliant, Lucy, and thanks for that. Thank you kind of for your openness. And as you were speaking, I was thinking, those are traces of my own experience. And the general human condition at the moment is very predisposed to anxiety, with all that's been going on in the world. Obviously lockdowns added to that, and there was a huge wave of that, and not everybody has been able to understand that and has kind of gone with that. And it is something that builds. I mean, it's almost like a wave, if you like, and you can feel it coming, and then you get pulled into the rip curl. And where therapy really helped me was kind of understanding that actually I could take a step back, I could take a step out of that anxiety, and I learned those things through my therapy, through able to be open about it and to explore things. It's something that it hits so many people. I mean, in fact, I think you'd probably be hard pushed to find somebody that hasn't actually had an anxious moment in their lives. I mean, you have actually described what it feels like. Is there anything you want to add to that? Or I think you answered that brilliantly, so if there's anything you want to add, then please do so. If not, then we can move on and talk about how common anxiety is. We could keep it to the UK, but I think it probably is worldwide. But is there anything you'd like to add to what it feels like? Or
I love what your metaphor there about it being a wave, because I think that is what it can feel like. And I think we have physical symptoms as well as emotional symptoms. And I think the physical symptoms sometimes can be perhaps much bigger and more overwhelming because we don't really understand what's happening to our body. And so you know, people experience panic attacks, you know, so where you can't breathe, tight chest, you know, kind of your stomach's kind of churning. You know, people will struggle to sleep, you know, or disrupted sleep, which is so kind of you know, it's so difficult to deal with that kind of day to day. And you know, perhaps you know, another kind of something that I experience as well is that I kind of get palpitations, and you know, and sweaty palms, and you know, needing to go to the toilet all the time.
Yeah.
You know, that and so those are almost not classic symptoms of anxiety, but they're very common symptoms of anxiety. And I think perhaps often people don't realise that actually what's going on for them is that they are experiencing anxiety in their bodies as well as emotionally.
Sure. I mean, my big one is my solar plexus, and I recognise that, and I do quite a lot of work on that, and I can kind of move that, so I'll put my hand over that spot. And again, this is stuff that I've learned in therapy. I learn, you know, that actually the mind and the body, they are one thing, and that if I do these you know, these little exercises, that actually I can really work with that. And it's rather than kind of running away from it, almost kind of confronting it and saying, okay, you know, what are the words you might want to hear from somebody else, and could you use those words to self-soothe, and all of those tools are really massively helpful, kind of parenting yourself and so on and so forth. I mean, in your experience, how common do you feel that anxiety is? You know, this was a very popular topic, and we've had a quiz, and we've had an unbelievable upsurge in people wanting to kind of understand anxiety. So clearly, I know from my own practice that was a hugely big presenting problem issue. What about you? Has that been something that you've noticed?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, I can really echo that. I think if I think about the kind of the clients that I work with, and also the way that I work, you know, I think I can't really think of a client who hasn't experienced anxiety at some point in their journey. And so you know, a lot of my work is really about helping them understand what's going on, helping them look at their triggers. You know, why is it whenever I do X, I always feel like why does that keep happening? And so, you know, I think having that space, you know, what you said there about having someone else just to say things to you, and to perhaps give you a different perspective and help you unpack that, you know, what is it about that certain behavior or that certain situation that always sends you into a tailspin? And why is it that you can't stop going into that situation? And so I, you know, so the way that I work, you know, I help kind of clients to really ground themselves. You know, you talked there about your solar plexus, and which I think is a really effective way. And something that I use quite a lot is like the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Yeah. So, you know, so 5 things, and I probably got it around the wrong way with senses, but 5 things that you can see, 4 things you can hear, 3 things that you can touch, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. I might have got that around the wrong way, but it's really a way about kind of taking yourself away from what you're feeling and bringing you back to the present, so that you perhaps get some perspective and some space from those overwhelming feelings.
I mean, I always use the meta position. So if I'm feeling that, I can kind of, it's a bit like having a helicopter. So it's like, okay, what can I see? You know, fact, fear and fiction, you know, what are the facts here? And they're beautifully simple, but my goodness, they've driven me on to do things that, you know, previously when I was in a state of probably perpetual anxiety, I don't have to do anymore. And you know, and I have clarity, because you can always take that breath and have that clarity, but generally it's understanding that, and being in the therapeutic space helps you with that, because it's like, that's what I do, that's how I do it, that's why I do it. So it's really, really useful. How do you know if your anxiety is an anxiety disorder, and what is an anxiety disorder? Because there are so many different levels of. So I'm gonna give that to you, because I think it's a fantastic question, and I'd love to hear, as I'm sure all of our listeners would love to hear and know more about that.
Yeah, sure. So you know, when anxiety becomes an anxiety disorder, it's when it takes over your life. It's when you can't function day to day. It's when you don't have any perspective. Everything is overwhelming. You kind of roller coaster really from one anxious thought to the next, and and quite often someone might have depression as well. They might, there's quite often something else that's going on as well. But it's really about when you're not able to manage or function day to day, and that's when it can become an anxiety disorder. And that could be, it could be a general anxiety disorder. It could be something more specific, OCD, it could be a phobia, but it's really about when it starts taking over your life. And then that's really when, seeking professional help can just be such a game changer. Seeing a counsellor, seeing your GP as well, but seeing a counsellor and having that space to be able to think about really actually what is it that I'm worried about, what is it that I'm scared of. And actually, quite often it's, and I don't know if you've experienced this as well, Floss, but I quite often see with clients that the anxiety is masking something else.
But for sure, and I think when you are exploring with somebody, and I think that's the really important part. There is a lot of self-help stuff, which is great actually, but nevertheless, if you are so overwhelmed, it's important actually to work with a trained professional. And I highlight this a lot, having a qualified, trusted, properly trained therapist is so important. There are many tips, we'll go on to give some tips and so on, but on that journey, because there are underlying aspects to this, and there's obviously so many cases where there might be trauma involved, which we're not going to go into today because it is much more deep-rooted stuff. And I have a sense that those things really need to be treated very, very carefully. And you unpack that with another individual, and it's like saying, okay, we're going to go on this journey together, and you'll be held in that space, you'll be contained. So when things feel, triggering, and that's the last thing that you need. So that's why I always say, it's so important to work with a trusted therapist and stay with the process. I mean, that is, don't give up before the miracle happens. And the journey is such an important one that, investing, in mental health is mental wealth. And, ultimately we'll do all sorts of other things. We might go to the gym, or we might kind of get a really nice haircut, or I don't know, various other things. But it's so important, because when you unlock yourself from, having a life that is dominated by anxiety, it really makes everything, relationships, having kids, our enjoyment of work, social events and so on, it diminishes it. And, therapy is all about freeing you from, for all intents purposes, of the bondage of self and negative neural pathways, and planting new seeds, if you will. So, I mean, what are the kinds of techniques? And there are loads of brilliant things around. I'd love to hear some examples of your toolbox that, very much would be. I love hearing new things, and I love kind of meeting our great therapists, and having these discussions. It always brings something to my life, and I always learn something, and I'm always so open to learning things. So what your magic toolbox, if you kind of share a few things?
my magic toolbox. I think one of the, I think for me personally, and I practice this as well, is exercise. So it's and I do walk and talk therapy, which is just beautiful, like a beautiful thing to do. And so just being outside, whatever the weather, being alongside someone. So for some people who might find it perhaps a bit intimidating and a bit confrontational to be kind of face to face, being able to be next to someone and just being outside in the fresh air and having other things to look at can be so powerful and can really take you away from perhaps some of those anxieties and worries that you might have. So for me, that's probably one of my most effective.
That's fascinating. Yeah, and I love that. I remember doing therapy with somebody that had just had a baby, a long-term client, and we went for a walk, and the baby came, and that was beautiful because the baby was finding their voice, and it felt really important that we did that. And we kind of actually ended up walking through a beautiful rose garden, and I think metaphorically speaking, and at that time we ended working with one another, which felt like a really good time for us to part the ways. So I love that. And I think sometimes some people prefer not to do a Zoom call, so we'll just do it on WhatsApp. We'll do the session on WhatsApp, and they're more focused that way. So the things that you're suggesting, it would be not something that I would have done naturally for my training, but something definitely. And I love the idea that, that's a fantastic thing. What happens when it's raining? Do you still do the walk?
Yeah, absolutely. It might be a bit slower and a bit muddier, but I think it's really about, almost the weather perhaps is part of it, because it's about being outside, and it's about, perhaps building resilience and being able to perhaps cope in a different situation. But I think the most powerful thing is being alongside someone, and you're actually physically alongside them as well as metaphorically. And so that's so beautiful and powerful for a client who's perhaps struggling, particularly with anxiety.
That's super cool. I love that. I really do. I have heard about it, but it's very contrary to my very orthodox training. I mean, I don't work in that way anymore, but I love that because why not, right? Why not be in the real world? It is important, and there are different things for different people, obviously. Different strokes for different folks. Some people would be like, oh my God, I couldn't do that. And clearly what you're saying is you're very comfortable doing either, and you'll adapt it according to the client that you might be working with. And that's also so important.
I think absolutely. I think that's a really important point, actually. I think anxiety. I think it can be quite anxiety inducing to go for counselling.
Yeah.
And I think that's a natural response. You're about to meet someone that you don't know. They don't know you. There's no trust yet. So I think it's normal to feel anxiety. But then I think part of our role is to ease that anxiety and build that kind of warm, welcoming space. And whether that's indoors or outside, it's the same principle. And so I'm very much client-led, and I have clients who some weeks we might go for a walk, other times we might have a Zoom call, other times they come to my treatment room in person. It's really what works for them, and how and it's part of their journey. So being flexible, I think, is a big part of that.
I love that. Absolutely love. I love the creativity of the jobs that is it a job? I don't really think it is a job. The vocation, the things that we're able to do, and the kind of watching people grow in that way, and it's a huge privilege. Do you have any more little tricks up your sleeve?
So I work quite creatively, so quite often we use kind of drawing, creating how people feel. That can be really powerful as well, kind of creating what anxiety feels for someone, and then helping a client explore actually what they've created and the colours that they've used, and that can be really powerful as well. And then, I also work with stones as well. I don't know if you work with stones, but that's a really beautiful way to help people think about relationships, particularly if they've got anxieties in relationships. That can be a really, beautiful and powerful way to think about things in a different way. And then really, breathing exercises, that's a really great way to help relax, and particularly for someone who's maybe struggling to sleep.
Yeah. It's hilarious because I do a lot of courses, and I have done a fair few in my many years, and one of the things I always forget to do is breathe. I do not breathe, right? In fact, when you said it, I was like, oh, I better breathe, right? I mean, of course I'm breathing because I'm still here, right? But I think what actually happens is I forget to breathe, and I know that that's part of my toolbox when I'm super anxious. Actually, breathe, okay, because it's a circuit breaker, and I'm much better when I'm breathing, right? For all sorts of situations, either when I feel anxious or when I feel angry. Breathing's a really good thing to do, right? And we're often in our heads. And it is something that I need to, I had to train myself to acknowledge, if I've got an important meeting or whatever, just breathe, right? And it's, my goodness, how simple, but how hugely potent and effective that is. So that's another super cool one. And the breathing exercises are so important. They're so powerful, right?
And they're so easy and simple. I think, like you say, we do forget to breathe. And so one exercise I like to use is kind of box breathing, so where you breathe in, you hold it for 4, you breathe out, you hold it for 4, and it just helps everything calm down, physically and emotionally. And it's a great tool.
It is a great one. Remember to breathe. That's a really good one. And I remember in sessions, you doing that with clients, breathing with them, and getting into the space where obviously they were safe enough, because that's important. You'd never ask somebody to shut their eyes if they didn't feel comfortable. And it's an exercise that I used to kind of say, okay, just sit with yourself for 5 minutes. Just sit with yourself for 5 minutes and do the box breathing and see what comes up. Speak to yourself, speak to your body, and your mind, right? So that is a super useful one. And sometimes 5 minutes felt like too long for people. So, if you can do it for 2.5 minutes, great. Or for however long you can do it. And again, that's obviously a client-led thing. Any other little things that you with pearls of wisdom you might like to share?
So another technique is humming.
Okay.
Which is another great way of kind of, I suppose it's another grounding technique, but it also just calms everything down. It's a great way of distracting yourself physically and emotionally from anxiety and tension, and it helps you go to sleep. It just helps you feel better about yourself. And you only have to do it for a couple of minutes. If you think about a yoga class, you start a yoga class usually with an om, and you finish with an om, and it's the same principle. It's about bringing energy back into your body and helping you relax.
Okay, I love that, and I'm going to try it. It's funny, as you were talking, I started to hum a little bit, right? Hopefully nobody my very out of tune humming, but yeah, it is a good thing. I like that one a lot. I shall nab that one. And you, thank you so much. And self-care is a big one. Did you find? Yeah, okay. And what do you mean specifically? Because I might have other things I'd love to know, again, just because this is my big joy in what I do. I get to speak to amazing people about things that help others with their mental health and improve their lives remarkably. So what are the self-care things that you would recommend?
So I always suggest to clients that they're kind to themselves and they're a friend to themselves, and and that they try and take time to do things that are just for them, and whether that's going and having a really nice coffee somewhere on their own, or going for a drive, or going and getting their nails done, or like you mentioned earlier about getting your hair done, but just something that makes them feel good is incredible. It's such a it just kind of feeling emotionally good about yourself and physically good about yourself, even if it's just for a short period of time, can make such a difference. And the more you do it, I work with so many clients who say to me all the time, I don't have time for myself, I never have time for myself. And of course, by not putting themselves first, they're perpetuating the anxiety. So by deliberately carving out time for yourself means that you start to put yourself first and look after your own needs rather than looking after everybody else's needs, and then it becomes normal, it becomes more normal, and so that can only be a good thing, I think. So self-care for me is critical.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely get that kind of withholding piece where we feel really bad about ourselves. I mean, obviously, or we feel anxious, and often you have high adrenaline and really high cortisol as a consequence. So we feel bad, and it'd be like, oh, I just haven't got time to do that, because literally we're just trying to make it from A to B. We get up in the morning, getting through the day, and anything more would just feel like too much. And then we just build this kind of cycle, and it becomes really oppressive, actually. So I do think we all need glitter to look forward to. We all need to walk towards the light. So whatever it may be, it is just literally so important. And one of the things I always do is one of my big loves in life is candles, or any delicious smell, and I can literally change my mood. And that's just so I might just go to bed a little bit early, and I'll light my favorite candle, maybe put some oil, so that using those things. I mean, it's not tremendously expensive to do that, but it's important. My son, he loves delicious aromatherapy baths, so that's his kind of gig. My husband, I think, probably just likes sweets. I'm not sure. I'm not sure, but occasionally that's so cool. But I do think it's really important to punctuate either the monotony, because that way, if we break something and we remove ourselves from the problem, then we can start to kind of join up the dots and improve our mental health, and not always be anxious. I find it really calming to have that smell. It just makes me feel, so that's when I breathe as well, noticeable. So I have a whole correlation of, if I do A, then B is actually going to fall, and then that becomes a habit. And what we want really positive habits, because I'm sure most of us have quite a few negative, self-defeating habits. So it's really important to build the other ones in, no matter how big or small, they're just really, really important. Yeah. So the self care is just essential in every way. Even just having a nice shower and putting on fresh, clean clothes, because you are cognitively changing the way you feel. I mean, quite literally, you might be washing off the anxiety or the way you feel about yourself, literally in the shower, and then you give yourself the opportunity to break with that and move into a better, if you like, cleaner space. So that that again, yeah. So that's a fantastic thoughts. Any more for any more?
I know. I mean, I think it might be worth touching on boundaries a little bit. Just thinking about kind of self-care and how important boundaries can be in keeping yourself safe. I've learnt myself through my own life experience and my own therapy that actually I struggle with boundaries sometimes, and so if we struggle with boundaries, then we're perhaps exposed and maybe more vulnerable than someone who is not, who doesn't struggle. And so it's important to try and put boundaries in place, maintain those boundaries, particularly in relationships, thinking about things that, keeping ourselves safe in the sense that, this is kind of psychologically safe, as well as physically safe. But if we feel psychologically safe, then we are less likely to feel anxious about something. And so, and I think it all relates to self-care, and so if you're able to have healthy boundaries, and are able to, keep yourself safe as much as you can, then your anxiety will improve.
Absolutely. And I remember, so one of the things for me was understanding that the boundary I made was the boundary I needed to keep. Now, I never felt the possibility that I could either say no or leave a situation. I could change my mind, right? So I would be kind of herring down the thing, thinking, this isn't a good thing. I'm feeling anxious. This isn't a good thing. And so rather than saying, actually, do you know what? I've changed my mind, and either leave a situation or not get into it in the first place. I just was, once I'd said yes, I felt I had to go ahead with whatever that was. And so that boundary for me was, I can always change my mind. So I think, on that level, that has been so massively empowering with me. Now, I needed to make there were a lot of bumps in the road, and it's a point I always go back to. And that's another thing. I have this treasure trove of what I learned in therapy and how it changed my life. So I have this stuff, right? And it's always there. So I've got this kind of bank, and I can, it's grown obviously through life's difficulties. And I've had a lot of, difficulties. Being in therapy, being a therapist doesn't mean to say that life isn't going to come at you from all angles. But definitely the boundary one of, I can say no. I can leave. I don't have to stay with a situation. If I said yes, and then I want to change my mind, and so that for me is my really big boundary. So if things are escalating, I'm feeling super anxious about something, and usually when I know that I can change my mind, interestingly, the anxiety just dissipates, and it's like, okay, so that's pretty cool.
And maybe that relates to being in control as well. And
Yeah.
that, if you when we feel out of control of any situation, it's anxiety inducing.
Yeah, for sure.
But when we're able to take control, and obviously because we can't control other people, but we can control ourselves, so we can control what we say and what we do and how we react and behave, by consciously taking control of a situation, we're helping our anxiety.
I think there was a play actually, and I'm going to borrow this. I'm actually in recovery, and I'm coming up to my 30th year, but we have a saying which is powerless over people, places and things. And it's just like one of the truest things ever, right? So yeah, going back to the kind of control issue, you just have to relinquish control, and all you can do is keep your side of the street clear and stay within your boundaries. And that was the kind of shock for me. It's like, well, I'll put those boundaries in place and everyone else will respect them. But generally it was me that was, if you like, not respecting my own boundaries, because I would be, in various positions where I'd say yes to something, or, and I should have said no, So anyway, I think it's really illuminating. So boundaries is always a good one. It's been fantastic. I've really, thoroughly enjoyed our chat and speaking with you. I'd love to come and see you for therapy. And that's always kind of, the yardstick. the therapists on our site are just amazing, and I get to learn all sorts of new things, and it makes me really excited and feel that, you know, that we're doing something really, really worthwhile. So any goodbyes or whatever you want to leave with anybody, or not?
Well, thank you for having me. I think there's a quote that I really love, that from Carl Rogers, who's probably one of the most eminent thinkers in psychology, and one of his quotes is that he says that I'm not perfect, but I'm enough. And I think if we try and remember that, you know, that's a really good philosophy and way to be. And so, yeah, that's kind of what I'd like to leave with today.
Okay, that really is lovely. And as you said it, I could just feel myself go, Okay, so that's beautiful. Well, listen, thank you so much, Lucy. I'm sure I'll see you again. I'm sure our viewers will want to watch you, and you'll be in high demand. We'll have another discussion soon, I'm sure. But listen, thanks so much for your time and sharing so much wisdom, and, you know, everything with us. It's really fantastic. Thank you.
Thanks, Ross. It's been, thank you.